What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about posture and mobility training, and we're going to be going over a how-to on what is the best way to hit these two components to get what we're looking for. All right. So first off, we're going to jump right into posture. With posture, we're looking at three different keys to each one of these. Each one of these meaning the posture and mobility training. For posture, I want to think about first is the position. I don't know if you can see it see this, how far it is from here, from the camera, but the first one is going to be position. And what I mean by position is if we're talking about something as simple as trying to create a better posture for our upper body. So if I have a client coming in and the first thing I see is shoulders rounded forward, and then I ask them a few questions about, what they're looking for, what are our goals, and I asked them a simple question, which is important as a personal trainer is, what's your day-to-day job or what's your day-to-day activities? Do you have a job that involves you with a lot of movement, or you're in an office setting? If they're saying they're in an office setting, I know they're sitting here and they're probably slouched forward for 7-8 hours in a day. So I know I need to create a better position for them to actually help with their posture, which is going to be their positioning. And for, like we said, the upper body, we want to work on muscle groups that actually involve them expanding the chest. Now, that doesn't mean we want to do a lot of chest work for the chest to grow. It's actually the opposite. We want to hit that mid-back, the rhomboids, which is right in between your two scapulas here. It helps create a better position if we can strengthen that muscle group. But in order for us to strengthen it, we also need to focus on, which is our second key, is the static, or I should say stationary movement. So what I mean by that is we're trying to get into a position to where we're trying to actually expand and hold that position. Now, this is where it becomes really tough because subconsciously you're not going to be able to hold your shoulders back the entire day. It's just not going to happen. Now, there's other external pieces that you can add to it, such as sometimes you'll see people, they'll order some of the back braces or the straps that goes around the shoulders just to help with their postures, which can help too as well if that's needed. But we also want to try to focus on when we're in the weight room, or if you're at home or just, your day-to-day, you want to try to think subconsciously of keeping those shoulders back, but you also want to involve movements in the gym or in home that involves you actually trying to expand that chest by working on that backside, working on that mid-back like we talked about. And then the last key here is going to be isometric holds. So in the personal training world, an isometric position is a muscle action. So you're thinking of concentric, eccentric. If we're talking about a bicep curl, if you're bringing two muscles together, they're talking about a concentric movement. This is concentric. This is eccentric, lowering phase, or you're talking about an isometric hold when we're just isometrically holding a muscle. We're contracting it and we're trying to hold it. It's the same thing working for trying to create a better position. I'm trying to really work that mid-back by bringing the shoulders back and isometrically holding this anywhere from 8 to 10 seconds, a couple reps, just to kind of help you out. All right, and that'll help us create a better position with our posture. And just a brief description, we're talking about exercises or techniques used for posture training are often focused on training or targeting the core, which is going to be huge for creating a better posture. If we have a weak core or a core that just doesn't activate as much as we need to, this can involve things like slouching or the hip flexors taking over, which can cause other problems like sciatica, or you have that piriformis, which is kind of just in that glute area, that butt area, which is just a nagging pain, and eventually that could turn into some sciatica pain. So those are things that we want to be aware or careful of. And then we also want to strengthen the upper back posterior chain, which is just your backside, as well as stretching the tight muscle group. So if we're trying to create a better position and we have somebody with the rounded shoulders, we know we need to stretch the chest muscles to kind of help us expand out. But these are not involved with not so much of movement, it's just static holding or it's just stretching. So I'll make a note of that here. If we're talking posture, we're really trying to focus more on the stretch. We're really trying to focus more on the stretch of trying to help those muscle groups out, especially if we're trying to create a better position for our posture. Those are three key of my components that I look for that I think can help some of my clientele, or for instance, for someone like me too as well. Even though I don't I don't have a job to where I'm sitting for long hours of the day. Majority of the time, 12 to 14 hours a day, I'm on my feet. But from overusage or training for when I was playing sports, I've kind of built that position of my shoulders are rounding forward. So I make sure I also do a lot of posture training as well. That's going to be very important for us. All right, now it's going to bring us into our second phase, which is the mobility. All right, so with mobility, again, we're going to talk about 3 key points. First one is going to be that range of motion. Now, these two go hand in hand. Before I can work on the range of motion, I need to get into the best position possible. One thing I also want to keep in mind, even though I'm working on that posture, or even though you're working on those stretches, you also need to make sure you're taking that muscle group through a full range of motion if we're talking mobility. So the static and stretching is fine, but we also need to make sure that we're having that full range of motion. So this is where it becomes different from the two, okay? So what's one of our second main objective when it comes to mobility training? We're really trying to focus on movement. That's a big key point when we're talking mobility training. We're talking about taking that muscle group through its full range of motion. And then we're also trying to help release those that release technique that helps with tight muscles like we talked about before. The chest is really tight when we're talking about shoulders that tend to cave in, or somebody sitting at an office job and their shoulders are caving, the chest becomes really tight. So we need to do a release technique, which is just static stretching, or it's actually taking that muscle group into its full range of motion. So if I'm working on a door stretch, I'm really trying to step into that door, stretch the chest out, and then take a step back. But I'm going through that full range of motion and that release technique to help with that mobility of the chest, okay? Just a brief description. Exercises and techniques used for mobility training are often to increase range of motion during movement, which is what we talked about, range of motion, movement, and release technique. Taking the muscle group through its full range of muscle action to increase the movement at an angle. Form and technique is important for both posture and mobility training to decrease the risk of injury. So these two go hand in hand. As much as I am going to work on that range of motion, I need to make sure that I'm in the best position possible to do so. It doesn't matter if I'm working on exercises that helps with stretching the chest, but if I still have my shoulders rounded forward, I'm defeating the purpose of it. So I need to make sure that I'm in the best position possible. It's the same when you see a lot of people do the kneeling stretch, and then they just overextend at the hips. Well, we're not hitting the right muscle group first because we're not in the best position possible to actually stretch that hip flexor. So we need to make sure that our posture is correct so we can go into that full range of motion. And that's the difference between the posture and the mobility training and how it ties together, but how it's also different from each other. So, all right, guys, so I hope what we talked about today helps you guys out a lot. Like I said, I wanted you to know the difference between posture and mobility training, but for you to also understand how these two can also work together. These two components can also help with just the full functionality of how you move in everyday life, whether it's walking, running, jumping, bending over to grab something from off the floor and you kind of throw your back out. There's a reason why posture training and mobility training can help you guys on both separate or together. And that's what we're trying to figure out, and that's what we want to, that's the goals that we want to accomplish today. So if that helps or you got any question, just leave a comment in the box below. Or if you want me to hit on some more topics that involve movement or posture or just related to anything, whether it's sports or just weight training, reach out to me and I'll see if I can make a video for you as quick as possible, all right? You guys enjoy.